Mark, or John Mark, is the author of the Gospel of Mark, and we can actually piece together quite a bit of his story just looking at the New Testament and these small notes where he's mentioned throughout the New Testament. The first mention we see of him is in Acts chapter 12, where we see that his house is a place where the disciples would gather and where they're praying for Peter. And we get a hint that maybe his family was involved with Jesus and the disciples, maybe from early on. We saw that kind of played out cinematically in The Chosen. Then John Mark goes on the mission journeys with his cousin Barnabas and Paul. There's a falling out between Paul and Barnabas over John Mark. John Mark had run home. Maybe he got sick. Maybe he was just couldn't take it. Paul feels like he is not suitable for ministry because of this, and him and Barnabas butt heads. We see the relationship is restored between John Mark and Paul because in Colossians, when Paul is in prison in Rome in a tough time in his life, John Mark is visiting Paul. He's there with him, and Paul sends his greetings from Mark to the Colossians. We see that the relationship further is restored in 2 Timothy. Towards the end of Paul's life, Paul asks for John Mark to be sent to him. He says that Mark is useful for his ministry. And this is where we kind of get this hint that maybe Mark was a good writer. Maybe this may have something to do with why Paul wants to send for him at the end of his life. We see in 1 Peter that Peter is writing from what he calls Babylon, which most commentators take to be Rome, and Peter is there with Mark. And so we can piece together this picture of who John Mark was. He's in some way tangentially involved with the disciples for a very, very long time, possibly throughout the ministry of Jesus or some part of the ministry of Jesus, that he has this kind of this rough moment in ministry, that he's restored in ministry, and that he becomes useful to the apostles of ministry. He's with Paul in Rome, he's with Peter in Rome, and we learn from church history that it's believed that Mark wrote down basically sermon notes from Peter as he was going with him in Rome and hearing him speak about Jesus. And especially towards the end of Peter's life, which is when the Gospel of Mark was believed to have been written down, Mark wants to codify those sermon notes.